Welcome to Reddit Aliens. What's the scariest true story you've heard or told? Part 2. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. I've told this story before. I'm an eye doctor, and I had a patient come to me with an infected eyelid. 2 other eye doctors tried to treat it and failed. They were dumping all sorts of medicine into it, and it wasn't getting any better. At this point, it was swollen and painful for weeks with no improvement, despite being on tons of meds. Apparently, neither of them thought to flip the lid upside down. You know, that gross trick some kids play to do with their upper eyelids? It was a painful maneuver for her very swollen eyelid, which might explain it. Anyhow, there appeared to be what looked like a visible abscess inside the tissue with thick, gooey material. I thought I'd give it a nudge and saw it move. This wasn't an abscess, it was something else. I managed to remove it quite easily in one whole piece. It was a fly larva. Ugh. The patient told me that she had a bug hit her in the eye a few days before she got this infection. I removed the larva, and within 2 days, the wound closed, and she was 100% recovered on basic antibiotic eye drops. Yes, I do have the photos from this case for those interested. I am TLDR. Patient had a bug lay an egg in her eyelid, and I removed the larva. This happened to me. This is from the days when I used to live back home. I used to live in Karachi, Pakistan, but now moved to UK. We used to live very close to CID, Police Investigation Department, aka Pakistani FBI, building, which we all were unaware of and always thought it was just an ordinary government building till on the 11th, November 2010. On that day, around evening time, coming home from work, I thought I'd better hit the gym because they had a sauna, and after being tired from all-day work, that sounded like a good idea, which was hardly zero point 0.3 miles away, so I decided to walk to the gym. I change quickly and leave for the gym and start walking towards the gym. This is I've hardly walked like 10 minutes, and I'm 0.1 miles away, roughly, and all of a sudden, for a nanosecond, I feel the ground is shaking, and the next thing I hear is the loudest bang I've ever heard, followed by a pressure kick into my chest. Now, to let you guys know, both my ears started bleeding because the bang was so loud, and for reference, the kick in the chest was as bad as Big Show wearing military boots and kicking you in the chest straight with full force. Next thing, I'm on the ground covering my ears because they are in agony and covered in dirt, trying to figure out what's happening. As I'm trying to figure out, I can see all the car alarms have gone off. Anything made up of glass has been shattered in roughly a 1 to 2 mile area. I'm still trying to figure out what has happened, and I start smelling gunpowder, and as if someone is making a barbecue and is being burnt. I will always remember that smell, which was something unsettling. Next thing, rocks and dust particles start landing on me and the surrounding areas, which had 1 to 1.5 inches long pieces of human skin and flesh. I'm not believing that I have another human skin piece stuck to my arm. I brush up my clothes, and arms getting up and covering my ears recovering from the pressure kick. As I move closer to a spot in the street where I'm hearing loads of people screaming and crying, I see a few 3 to 5 foot cracks between some walls of the building which have been destroyed by the shock wave of the bang. I see the gap between a wall and move into the area where I see these scenes straight from a Hollywood movie where people are crying, cars on fire, and dead bodies on the ground. By this time, I'm thinking it's a bomb blast, and that's what happened. As I move closer, I see a 10 foot by 30 foot wide crater which has been filled with water, and the building, which was a CID building, is no longer there. There are hundreds of people lying on the ground crying for help, as some of them don't even have legs or limbs, or some don't have their complete bottom. I'm still in a state of shock, looking around, and I see a woman crying and hitting herself because she had her husband dead whose legs and torso were missing. I see that later. I see several people without legs, brains out, and no limbs. One thing, which haunted me for sure, was an 18 to 20-year-old guy who was dead and lying on the floor toward his chest on the floor with his neck turned toward me. I can still remember him looking straight into my eyes. His feet were flipped the other way around. After the police arrived and media arrived, I came back home after it got crowded. After I came home, after the dusk every day, I would see that 18 to 20-year-old boy standing and staring into my eyes. I would wake up screaming throughout the night, and regularly during midnight, standing in my hallway, staring through my soul. I still remember that guy's face and the shockwave and the sound of the blast. P.S. To this day, even the slightest bang or even a loud music drop freaks me out sometimes, reminding me of that shockwave. I'm married, so sometimes I tell my wife that that bang just reminded me of that shockwave I witnessed in this accident. I don't tell her, but inside my heart, I pray secretly that God doesn't ever put anyone through that, even in their wildest dreams. My HIV story. I was on a trip on my first commercial flight from Sacramento to San Diego to visit my girlfriend, and I didn't feel well. Once I got off the plane, I made it to the hotel and had bouts of nausea and diarrhea for a few days straight, and finally decided to go to the hospital. After waiting hours, I was let into a room, and sometime later an Asian woman wearing a mask and gloves entered. "Please leave the room," she told my girlfriend. "Let's call her Beatrice." "No, she can stay, it's okay," I said. The doctor still hadn't looked at me, but looked back to Beatrice. "I think you should leave." I looked at Beatrice and said, "Can you please wait outside?" Right as the door closed, the doctor said, "You have HIV." My mind instantly started racing, trying to problem solve. "I can't have AIDS. I got tested before being with Beatrice and I was clean," I said. The doctor again, "You have HIV." While avoiding eye contact, I looked at my palms, and for the first time in my life, they were sweating, really sweating. I said again, I can't, I've been tested." The doctor flipped a page and asked my name, which I responded. And finally, the doctor's eyes made contact with my own. "I'm so sorry. I have the wrong chart. You have strep, throat, and laryngitis." I remember the world ending, and then the feeling the most relief I've ever experienced in my life. When I told Beatrice the whole story, she awkwardly laughed and said, "But you don't have AIDS, right?" To this day, when I tell people what happened, a good portion say, "But you don't have AIDS, right?" Whole lot of effing nope. The story of John Edward Jones getting stuck in Nutty Putty Cave in Utah. He became wedged in the tight crawl when he took a wrong turn in the cave system. Rescuers could do nothing to get him out, and he was stuck in there for 28 hours before he died from cardiac arrest because the feet were above his head and his heart was pumping overtime. One of the rescuers even gave him a phone to call his wife and talk to his young daughter before he died. This thread is probably dead now, but when I was about 4 and my brother was 11, we stayed at my aunt's between moving house. Her neighbor had a son my brother's age, so my bro used to go play with him on the weekends, etc. One day, my brother goes over after lunch. The dad opens the door, says the kid and mom are out shopping, but come on in and have some juice and tell him about how the move is going. My bro goes in, has a drink and a chat, then comes back to my aunt's after no more than an hour. A few days later, police are all over the place. Turns out the dad murdered his wife and kids, and was in the middle of burying them in the back garden around the time my brother knocked. Crazy to think what could be different if my brother had visited a couple of hours before, or caught that guy on an off day. I had brain surgery roughly 3 years ago. I lost my concept of time. What felt like 4 months was only 3 days. The amount of physical, mental, and emotional pain I went through was crazy. I had to find all of my memories and relearn how to walk, talk, everything. If you want to go through something terrifying, that is it. Off the main road of a place I used to work at, a guy decided to climb under a bus to hitch a free ride. Well, the bus went over a speed bump and the guy fell and ended up getting caught on the back wheel. His body was dragged 5 blocks before the bus driver realized what was happening. A police officer, who came into our store regularly, told us that the guy was still alive when they got to him, but died an hour later. He said his whole back was scraped off, exposing his spine. I remember driving down that road after the fact, and you could still see a deep red bloodstained trail going on for those 5 blocks. Absolutely horrifying. In real life account. I used to love swimming. I'd go snorkeling, scuba diving, even jumped off a few cliffs into the water. When I was about 18, I read the Necronomicon, the collection of Lovecraft short stories, not the real thing, had a good stare, giggled at how silly I was to be unnerved, and went about my life. Next year, went to Crete on holiday. First day, I jumped right into the ocean with my dad and went out deep. Lo and behold, I feel something tickling my legs. I dive under to see it since it's too deep for seaweed to reach that high, and I wanted to see fish. Tentacles. Everywhere. I was so shocked I lost my air and panicked hard. I started breathing in the water as glowing eyes, sharp beaks, and suckered tentacles flashed about me. Thankfully, Dad got me to the shore and didn't understand what was going on. He'd seen nothing, but suddenly had a really grim look on his face. Went to the doctors. Turns out I'm the victim of a family curse, schizoaffective disorder. My dad was horrified cause since he hadn't got it like his brother and mother, he thought I'd be safe. They caught it early, but this revelation then led to a lot of aspects of my life being thrown in the air. Entire people in my life became false. Ideas I'd had were delusional. Outbursts revealed to be due to mood swings. I'm doing much better now. I still don't go in the water. One of our employees fell into the hammer box. This is a device filled with ultra-high torque rotating hammers used to grind up large appliances into scrap metal. It apparently turned 3 times before the emergency shutoff was hit, pulling in half the employee's body at a diagonal running from the middle of his pelvis to his shoulder. The gruesome part was that he was still alive, as the pressure from the hammers was holding the enormous wound shut. It took 30 minutes for EMTs to arrive while he screamed for them to simply turn the machine back on and end it. He didn't make it. Walking my dog and crossing the street with a green light, and the guy blows through the red light and almost hits me and the dog. I yell, "Asshole!" and he slams on his brakes and turns around and pulls into the parking lot ahead of me. I get closer and see the car has Illinois plates. I live in Pennsylvania. He says, "Careful who you call asshole, I've killed people." I just kept walking and he drives away. The next day, I hear spree killer Andrew Cunanan was a stolen credit card at a gas station in my town. 100% was him I called an asshole. I worked at an animal hospital in Las Vegas and loved it, until one day when I hear something off over the radio as I'm doing my walks. We get a lot of feedback and it was a short transmission, but I was certain it sounded like someone screaming, with a dog barking in the background. It was very short though. I was unsure, but I trusted my gut. I jogged over to the main treatment building and looked in. No screaming, no panic. Thought I was tripping. Decided to check the luxury boarding building where my boss Gabby was. Silence. I decided to trust my gut again and walk further into the building despite no one else seeming alarmed here either. I walked to the end of the hall where my boss would be and peered through the small plexiglass window in the door. First thing I see is blood smeared on the walls. I freeze for a second and bust in. There's blood smeared on the wall, floor, countertops, doors. My 120-pound female boss is between 2 pit bulls, ruthlessly fighting to the death. The dogs are locked onto each other, and she's trying to pull them apart, repeatedly losing her footing from all the blood on the floor. I grab the attacking dog from behind his collar. Gabby grabs the dog being attacked or whining. It doesn't work. I start radioing for help, maybe 10 seconds straight of screaming for help before I drop the radio and had to attend to the fight again. The aggressor unclamps and reclamps on the dog's neck. I'm out of ideas and help isn't coming, so I look around and see a 10-pound metal food bowl on the counter. I grab it, pause, look at my boss to see if she's cool with my plan, and she says yes. So I wail on this dog 7 or 8 times until he lets go and walks away. I take the wounded dog to treatment, furious and covered in blood, as they listen to easy rock with their radios off. Bonus, a receptionist asked me later that day what all that noise on the radio was about. I asked her what she meant and what she heard. I heard someone screaming and saying there was an emergency, but I was with a client and it was really loud, so I turned it down. I of course am tasked with cleaning up all the blood. I then quit. I think the story of Tina Fey getting the scare on her face is super effed up. She was a kid just sitting and playing in her front yard when a random guy pulled up, got out of his car, and slashed her face for no reason with a razor. WTF. My mother never taught me to swim because when she was a teenager, she saw a friend get sucked into a whirlpool at the bottom of a drainage lake that is the deepest body of water within a few hundred miles of us. They didn't find his body for days. My mom was study partners with Ted Bundy. He invited her to go to his apartment to study. A law professor pulled her aside after class and warned her that he was being investigated by the FBI. Shortly after he was arrested, but escaped from prison. Left behind in his jail cell was my mom's name and address. Without the law professor's warning, it could have turned out much differently.